All right, good afternoon. As you will have seen, the Secretary General today in Geneva spoke at the University of Geneva on his disarmament agenda. He began by commenting on the announcement of the cancellation of the summit between the President of the United States and the leader of the DPRK. The Secretary General said he regretted the cancellation of the planned meeting and urged the parties to continue their dialogue to find a path towards the peaceful and verifiable denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And in a statement we had issued earlier in the morning, the Secretary General also welcomed today's reported closure of the nuclear test site at Pyongyang-ri in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It is regrettable, however, that the international experts were not invited to witness the site closing. In the comments he made at the University of Geneva, where he launched his disarmament agenda, the Secretary General outlined three priorities for his agenda. First, disarmament to save humanity, which aims to reduce and eliminate weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, chemical, and biological. Second, disarmament that saves lives, which seeks to reduce and mitigate the impact of conventional weapons. And third, disarmament for future generations, which seeks to prevent technological advances like artificial intelligence from being used for malicious purposes. The Secretary General stressed that we cannot create a safer world for all through uncoordinated actions. Disarmament works best when we work together, governments, experts, civil society, and individuals. His remarks are being issued. Right afterwards, the Secretary General also spoke to the press and took, I think, 3 or 4 questions, and our colleagues are working on that transcript right now. This afternoon, the Deputy Secretary General will depart New York for Geneva to participate in the 14th seminar for current special and personal representatives and envoys of the Secretary General, which will be held in Montpellier, and she will be back in the office on Tuesday morning. You will have seen that we announced this morning that the Secretary General will be spending Peacekeepers Day in Bamako, in Mali, with the troops and UN personnel from the UN mission in the country. He'll be accompanied for this visit by the head of the Peacekeeping Department, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, as well as the head of the Field Support Department, Atul Kare, and the Executive Director of UNICEF, Henrietta Fore. Upon arrival in Bamako, the Secretary General will attend a ceremony paying tribute to fallen UN peacekeepers. For the 4th year in a row, the peacekeeping mission in Mali suffered the greatest loss of life in 2017 of any UN peacekeeping mission, with 21 peacekeepers killed and 7 civilians. 21 peacekeepers and 7 civilians killed. The Secretary General will also be meeting with the President of Mali, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, the Prime Minister, Souleymane Boubèye Maïga, and other Malian officials. He will also do some field visits where he's expected to meet with local authorities, women, youth, and religious representatives. And during his visit, the Secretary General will also be fasting in solidarity for Ramadan. And meanwhile, celebrations here for Peacekeepers Day will take place on the next day on June 1st. Turning to the Sahel, the Emergency Relief Coordinator, Mark Lowcock, today released $30 million from the UN Central Emergency Response Fund to urgently scale up relief efforts in the Sahel, where an acute drought combined with exceptionally high food prices and worsening insecurity have escalated humanitarian needs. Thousands of families have exhausted their food reserves and are cutting down on daily meals. Up to 1.6 million children are at risk of life-threatening malnutrition, and 5 million people need food and livelihood assistance in what is expected to be the worst lean season in years. Mr. Lowcock stressed that to avert catastrophe, we need to act early to get assistance quickly to the most vulnerable people. The window of opportunity to help these communities during the lean season and the most difficult months ahead is closing soon, Mr. Lowcock said. And yesterday, the Assistant Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Bintou Keïta, briefed the Security Council on the G5 Sahel Joint Force. She commended the force member states of the G5 Sahel for their efforts over the past year to operationalize their joint force, but said a lot of work remains to be done as the process has incurred delays and the force is yet to attain full operational capability. Her full speech is available to you. And earlier today, the Special Envoy Secretary General for Burundi, Michel Kafondo, briefed the Security Council. He told Council members that following the referendum on the adoption of a new constitution, we are now waiting for a strong signal from the government in favor of the resumption of an inclusive political dialogue. Without such a signal, Mr. Kafondo expressed concern about a possible polarization of an already tense political situation. He also called on the authorities to facilitate the return of human rights experts whose visas were canceled last month, and to resume cooperation with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Even if the security situation is generally calm, Mr. Kafondo stressed that the recent assassination of 26 people in the Cibitoke province reminds us that the environment remains volatile and the humanitarian situation remains of concern. An inclusive dialogue under the auspices of the East African community is the only sustainable way forward, he stressed to Council members. And our colleagues in the African Union Joint UN Hybrid Mission in Darfur today expressed their deep concern about the recent attacks on 3 internally displaced persons camps in central Darfur state, which took place between the 21st and the 23rd of May and resulted in a number of fatalities and injuries among IDPs. The mission reminds all parties involved that IDP camps are considered humanitarian space, which should be free of weapons, where displaced people would not be subject to threats, harassment, attacks, or harm. Such actions constitute grave violations of international humanitarian law. And our colleagues at the UN mission in Afghanistan today welcomed the release in Kabul of a UNFPA colleague and her child who had been held hostage since January, while expressing outrage at their abduction and the earlier murder of another colleague who was also seized during the same incident. And we have a statement from the UN mission as well as UNFPA. And Jan Kubish, the head of the UN mission in Iraq, today strongly condemned the suicide bomb attack that took place in Baghdad yesterday. He said the attacks were the work of cowards who have no respect for human life and no respect for the holy month of Ramadan. Mr. Kubish said all Iraqis must stand united in rejecting their heinous acts and in working together to consolidate hard-won democracy. And today, the Humanitarian Fund for the Occupied Palestinian Territory announced the release of $3.9 million to address urgent water, sanitation, shelter, and protection needs. Over 75% of the allocation targets needs in the Gaza Strip, where the already dire humanitarian situation has been exacerbated since March 30th, 2018, by massive rise in Palestinian casualties in the context of demonstrations. In total, 13 projects will be implemented by the national and international non-governmental organizations. Humanitarian coordinator for the Occupied Palestinian Territory, Jamie McGoldrick, said that with this allocation, we ensure that humanitarian partners have their resources to respond to some of the most urgent needs. But this is a stopgap measure, and much more needs to be done. And the humanitarian community in Libya says it's perturbed by the continuing lack of humanitarian access and assistance into Douma, despite repeated requests. Humanitarian workers have not been allowed to deliver safe life-saving assistance in Derma, such as the supplies to support medical facilities and other basic services, as well as to provide food and other items that are in need. Shortages in medicine and medical supplies are reaching critical levels, and the first shortages are being reported. Humanitarian coordinator in Libya, Maria Ribeiro, calls on all parties to immediately allow safe and unfettered access to Douma for humanitarian workers and urgently needed humanitarian supplies. And a reminder that today here at headquarters, Matthew Nimitz, Secretary General's personal envoy, is meeting jointly with Nikos Kotsias, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece, and Nikola Dimitrov, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. The meeting is part of the UN's ongoing efforts to assist the sides in finding a mutually acceptable solution to the, quote, name issue. We'll let you know if media opportunities presents itself over the course of these talks. And in a very short while, I will be joined by Mohanad Hadi, WFP's Regional Director for the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia, and East Europe, and he'll speak to you about the humanitarian challenges in the region. And that's after Mr. Varma briefs you briefly. And tomorrow, Peter Salama, the Deputy Director General of Emergency Preparedness and Response for the World Health Organization, will brief you via video conference from Geneva on the Ebola outbreak in the DRC. And a planning reminder that you are welcome to be here on Monday, but no one else will be here because it's Memorial Day and we will not have a briefing. Halas. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have a few questions. First, Mladinov, in his briefing yesterday, he mentioned that the number of Palestinians killed was 76. I want to know how he came up with this number. If on the first day 19 Palestinians were killed, and the last day 61 killed, and everybody knows that, how he came up with that number 76, including 11 children.
The number, as always, is based on the credible information we receive from various sources.
But there are so many credible information that put the number over 100. This is an established, well-established fact.
I'm trying not to debate with you. Obviously, we're working based on the numbers that we have from our sources.
Can I ask for explanation?
I think I've used all the words I can to explain to you. I'll take your second question.
Okay, my second question. A child, his name is Uday Akram Abu Khalil, is 15, succumbed to his wounds. He was shot in the stomach by the Israeli forces in Ramallah. He's from a village called Al-Insinia. He's 15. Is there any statement on that? Is there any recognition?
I've not heard of this particular case. We will look into it. Obviously, we're saddened by any loss of death, but we'll look into it. Carol, and then Edie.
Stéphane, we saw the Secretary General's reaction to the cancellation of the summit. He says he's deeply concerned. So will he be doing anything to try to perhaps put the pieces back together? Is he planning to help in any way?
I think the Secretary General always remains available to all parties to try to help facilitate the process. Ms. Leder.
Steph, I asked on Monday about the knobs on the air conditioner of all of us.
I'm trying to get some answers for you.
No answers yet?
No. Sir.
Two questions as well. The first one is actually, yesterday the Secretary General did meet with the foreign minister of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And in covering that, minutes before it began, Ambassador Denny Danon of Israel came out of his office, and I didn't see it on his schedule. So I wanted to ask you, one, what was that meeting about? And two, what's the policy of your office, I guess it is, in terms of putting forward a public schedule which lists meetings with some permanent representatives, but in this case, not this one?
Some meetings are public, others are not.
At whose request? At whose decision? Seems like
it's a decision that's made.
It's a basic
next question.
Okay. Well, I guess I wanted to ask you this. I've been, for a couple of days, looking into this. People that work in your UN Department of Political Affairs have been confused and surprised to see, according to them, that the husband of the Chief of Staff, Kyoko Shiotani, John Van Rosendahl, has been designated to run the Security Council's website. They found it kind of strange because there was no need for it. He was brought in without any competition, according to them, and it seemed like a classic case of nepotism and affecting the Security Council itself. So I'm wondering, maybe you don't have the information at your fingertips, but can you find out how it is I've seen his thing. He's now called the Senior Program Officer.
I'm not aware.
After being
I'm
a
not aware of the
self-employed
case,
consultant.
and I'm sure all the rules were followed.
How are you so sure?
Secretary General met yesterday with the Macedonian and the Greek foreign ministers. Based on those meetings, how optimistic is he that the name dispute can be resolved?
I think this issue has been going for quite some time. We've had ups and downs. We're very happy to have Mr. Nimitz here host both parties. But I think in this case and in most of these delicate diplomatic negotiations, I think we will reserve judgment until an announcement is made. Is not to predict things one way or another. Predictions are dangerous. Yes.
On in the conversation with the Greek foreign minister, was there a discussion about Greek demands for Macedonian constitutional changes and
I mean, I think
whether
we've
or not
all seen the reporting. All these issues are being dealt with through the discussions facilitated by Mr. Nimitz. Yes, David.
Again, all parties call on the Palestinians and the Israelis to stop incitement. Yesterday, the U.S. Ambassador David Friedman received a gift which placed the Temple Mount in the place of Al-Aqsa Mosque. Isn't that an utmost expression of incitement that enrages millions of people?
I don't speak for the U.S. government, the U.S. ambassador, but I did see an interview that he did shortly after in which he completely distanced himself from that event. Evelyn.
Thank you, Steph. The Mali, the number of dead in the Mali peacekeeping mission, what's the time frame for that?
Sorry, the what?
What's the time period for that many?
It was in 2017, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, it's 2017, right.
If I actually paid attention to what I read. Shauna. Yes, it was 2017.
I just wanted to follow up with Carol's question regarding the cancellation. You said the SG is always ready to be available.
He remains available, yes.
But will he proactively make any phone calls? I know he's traveling. Once he comes back, will he arrange?
I will leave it at that for the time being. Edie.
As another quick follow-up, is the Secretary General giving any thought to appointing an envoy for North Korea?
You know, I think if he felt it was useful, he would do it. I'm not aware of any plans for him to do so at this point. Mr. Lee.
Sure. You said on this previous question, which I hope you will look into and get an answer to, because you just said you assume that rules are being complied with. But I want to ask you about a rule or at least guidance from the Secretary General that I tried to ask you yesterday as you walked off. And it has to do with, in the situation in the International Atomic Energy Agency, in which whistleblowers there say that the Director General, Mr. Amano, knew since at latest January 2018 of an open case of sexual harassment that took place at a retreat of the staff and did nothing until a whistleblower complained to OIOS over there. What is the policy of the Secretary General for the heads of UN bot system agencies to act on complaints? And if they don't act, and it turns out that it's founded,
I don't have the
details.
I don't have the details you have on the case. So I think for any of those details, you should address yourself to IAEA. The Secretary General made it very clear during the CEB that he wants all the heads of the UN agencies of which he has direct authority and the ones who are part of the CEB to be as proactive as possible in dealing with cases of sexual harassment. But as I said, I don't have the details of the IAEA case, and you should address your questions to them.
Does he believe that there should be some public component of this? Because one of the things that's left people at IAEA so angry is that even after the investigation, the person left with a full pension and was described it for family reasons. So again, without getting, as a general matter, does he believe that a part of justice in these matters is some public statement or accounting of what actually occurred?
Every case needs to be investigated to the fullest. Thank you, and I will leave you with Ms.
Haiti?
Varma.